Our movie starts with a teenage boy named Jim who enjoys watching movies. Jim is just about to play when his mother catches him and he starts to panic. Then, when his father arrives, he hears the sound of the girl wailing from the television at school. Jim has good friends named Kevin and Chris until Stifler joins, and he invites Paul, Kevin, and Chris to his party where there will be sexy college girls. Before leaving the virgin gym, they inquire about the sensation of banging before starting to talk about the party, and everything they are worried about is how to get laid with ladies there. Chris responds, "That reminds me of warm apple pie." Sexy college girls are present at Stifler's party, which has already begun. Around Kevin and Jim, who are both drinking beers, are students who are mingling and flirting. When Sherman enters the room, he declares that he wants to get laid with one of the party guests. Kevin's girlfriend Vicky moves closer to him. Meanwhile, Jim notices Nadia, who is the hottest girl there. He smiles at her and she smiles back. He then tries to approach her but is too clumsy and decides to go the other way. Chris is in the car hanging out with one of the attractive college girls. She teaches him how to treat a lady well. Kevin takes advantage of the situation by having a with Vicky. He pushes her to do it but she refuses because he doesn't think she's ready. As Stifler arrives to take over, he has no idea what's going on until he unexpectedly takes a random drink that has Kevin in it. He starts to feel uncomfortable and realizes that throwing up is such a nasty thing for him. In the meantime, the nerdy Sherman calls Jim and Kevin by introducing them to his lovely female, whom he plans to sleep with the next morning when they awaken unexpectedly and see Sherman downstairs with her. The guys are startled and amazed when he states that he has lost his virginity and is now a genuine man. Jim finds this hard to believe, as does Kevin, even though Kevin has spent months spending quality time with Vicky without success. Meanwhile, Sherman has a one-night stand with a girl and succeeds. Kevin invites Chris Finch and Jim to join him in making the commitment that, by the time they all graduate from high school, they would no longer be virgins. Chris joins a singing group with the choir goody students Kevin, Stifler, and Jim, who sit in the back of the auditorium and observe them with a peculiar feeling towards his buddy Chris. Chris informs them that he expects to win one of the prizes after finishing. Paul draws attention by playing golf in the school's yard with the choir girls, and Kevin questions his technique until a female approaches them who appears interested. Kevin contacts his wise brother long distance in quest of the information to appease Vicky. His brother tells him to go to the library and grabs a Chad manual book. She asks Paul if he has a date for prom, and he replies that he doesn't. He has to keep it a secret and return it at the end of the year after finishing the choir group. Heather, the girl who Chris crushes with, she compliments him that he was good at his performance. Then he says he wants to know about her a lot. Jim enters his house and sees a freshly baked pie on the counter made by his mom. He starts to imagine that pie is a girl's as he is doing him fantasizes. His dad discovers him in the kitchen, making him panic. His father isn't angry about it because it's completely typical for a boy his age. After the game, Chris finds Heather waiting for him on the sidelines. She appreciates his abilities and asks him to go to prom with her. When she turns around and sees Stifler making a joke with his seductive movements in front of Chris and Heather, he wholeheartedly embraces it. Heather, however, finds it hard to believe as Chris joins in the laughter. Kevin, after the session is done, he meets Vicky and does the tornado tongue method on her to make her feel as though she is in heaven. Nadia begs Jim to assist her with her history homework since she would be heading to his place the following day. Heather will also be meeting Chris there. When she observed him making fun of her with a Stifler, she hurriedly broke apart from him since she thought he was such a jerk and decided to cancel the prom plans. Jim then informs Stifler about Nadia, and Stifler convinces him to install a webcam in his room, create a secure internet link, and provide the address so that everyone may watch Nadia change her clothing. Jim proceeds to get ready, and as Nadia arrives, his pals are all set to witness the performance as she begins to remove her clothing. Jim races hysterically to Kevin's house to see Nadia and Kevin undressed together. As Nadia begins to undress, the boys are in awe of her amazing figure. Kevin encourages Jim to go back and he should lend her an additional hand when Nadia discovers Jim's collections and starts to play with herself. Jim rushes back toward his house, stopping briefly before entering his room to hear her sobbing on Kevin's side. Then, the phone rings, and Sherman tells him that he must have addressed the email incorrectly because it was sent to every mailbox in the East High directory, allowing everyone in the school to see them. After that, Jim arrives, surprising Nadia with his unexpected appearance. He tells her it's her chance to see him undress. He does so without even understanding that everyone in the school is keeping an eye on them. However, when he hasn't even touched her, Nadia asks him to play with her. When Jim is through, she is dissatisfied and wants to go home, despite his attempts to cheer her up by telling her that she is more exotic than the adult magazine. Jim is astonished, along with everyone else, when she urges him to touch her since they are in. When it happens, everyone is upset because it's over again. Everyone at school laughed the following day, and Jim didn't even realize what had happened until he said that Nadia had already boarded a plane for her home. Jim then suggested that perhaps he was simply not good with girls, which would explain why he couldn't talk to them and that whenever he did, he would mess up their conversations. Eventually, the hopeless Jim decided to ask Geek Michelle to the prom. She appears pleased to have heard it. Chris is shutting up his father's business when he glances up to see Heather arrive. Heather apologizes, and Chris then prepares a hot dog for her. They discuss about the major they will pursue after graduation. Chris informs Heather he can't participate in the singing competition because he forgot about something that indicates his last lacrosse game would be on the same schedule. Heather is very encouraging, stating Chris should do whatever makes him happy. Even though Heather appears to be looking down, it must be Chris who is duetting with her. While Heather appears to be lost and frightened, Chris is playing to help his team win, even if he isn't enjoying it. Chris chooses, after giving it some serious thought, to abandoning his lacrosse championship game to join Heather for a duet performance, and all the players rush back to the sidelines and gather around the coach for a briefing. Heather waits on stage with the group as Chris enters and kisses her. They flirt throughout their duet, join hands at the end, and the crowd enthusiastically applauds. Vicky tells Kevin that she wants to with him in front of everyone in the class, including Jim and Kevin. Kevin is astonished since the prom is about to start and all the students are rushing to look their best as they enter the school. Kevin and Vicky dance admirably with one another. Chris and Heather dance passionately, while Jim isn't enthusiastic about dancing with Michelle. They have the plan to stop being virgins before graduating, and tonight must be the moment, according to Kevin, who is reminding their pals of the matter. Paul and Jim have lost interest in the scheme and have left him alone, which is another reality. Sherman's virginity conquest is merely a lie he put up to impress his pals, and his girlfriend has taken over the band's microphone to inform everyone in attendance that she has never had sex with him. Then, in front of everyone, he urinates on himself. Kevin's voice is slow and dejected as Jim, Chris, and Paul followed him to go to the party at Stifler's. He ultimately agrees during Stifler's party, despite his ongoing remorse. That night, when they finally do it, Kevin takes Vicky into the bedroom. Chris and Heather have a beautiful evening together by the lake as Heather blushes as he confides in her about his intention to lose his virginity before the end of the school year. Chris then realizes that he should put Heather's feelings before his own. When Stifler's attractive mother asks Paul where his date is, he responds that he didn't bring his date and begins to pour a drink into her glass. After a brief period of time, their connection becomes more passionate and they become lost in one another. After a little while he is getting drunk and tells her how sexy she is, she immediately pulls him, and they do it on the pool table. Before she asks him to make out, Jim is doing his best to remain engaged in Michelle's ramblings since he isn't expecting her to have an aggressive, lusty female. The following morning, when Stifler searches for his mother and unlocks the door, Stifler enters, freezes in shock at what he had seen, and then collapses. This is how our movie ends. Tell us in the comments how you felt about this movie recap. See you in the following movie recap.